Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm gonna tell a couple more prison stories, I think. Some of them funny, one of them's just crazy and I guess a little funny, but not at the time, really. So I mentioned when you work in segregation or the hole, you had to feed them in their cells, so you would have to call the cafeteria and tell them how many inmates you had in the hole, and they'd bring that many trays. You'd tell them how many regular trays, how many alternate, because some people, are like vegetarians, so they bring them all vegetables, whatever. So you call that in, and they bring that specific amount of trays. And if you were brave enough to eat what came out of the kitchen cooked by inmates, you could order you and the other officers' trays. So we're working in Seg one day, me and a buddy of mine that I stayed friends with even after the prison, and so we're handing out the trays, and that same inmate I was talking about, you stole my doo-doo, that guy, he's in the story again. So one of us is feeding the top tier, one of us is feeding the bottom tier. I happen to be on the bottom tier. And so you got all the trays on these carts, and you just push them around. You open a flap, you hand them the tray, close the flap, lock it. So I get to inmate, you stole my doo-doo, and I open his flap, and I put his tray in, and he pulls the tray in, and he acts like he dropped it. And then he's throwing this fit. I dropped it. I need another tray. I dropped it. I need another tray. Now, I don't work in Seg all the time. So I back up to, ask my buddy that's feeding the inmates on the top. I said, this inmate acted like he dropped his tray and spilt his food or whatever. And now he's yelling about another tray. And this is inmate doo-doo. So he's going to do this the rest of the night. What do we do? And he's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, we called in a certain number of trays. So, I'm looking up at him. And when I look back down, inmate, you stole my doo-doo, reaches out of he's done reached out of his flap that I put his tray through, grabbed the cart with the trays on it, pulled it to his door, and he is just bringing tray after tray after tray in. So I grab the cart and pull it back, and I'm like, holy crap, he got like 3 or 4 more trays. Now we're going to be 3 or 4 short. I got to call the kitchen, get more trays. Now he starts hollering because he didn't get milk, and the milk's on the tray, on the cart. So I'm like, oh, Jesus, now I got to give this dude that just caused all these problems his milk. And I go to give him his milk, and he tried to cut my arm with a razor. They get razors to shave with one blade, and they'll pull them out. So I went to give him his milk, and he tried to cut my arm, and I just threw the milk in there, and he didn't get me. But it's crazy, man. Just plumb crazy. I hated going to Seg when he was there. So, yeah, that's the crazy story. I guess kind of funny because, I guess he was pretty smart to get me, looking elsewhere. And dude got all kind of food that day because he pulled in tray after tray after tray. Now, a couple funny stories. I worked with this guy. I won't give his name. Maybe he don't want people to know this. I don't know. But I worked with this guy, and we worked together for a while. We were on G2, where I was most of when I worked at the prison the first time. I was on G2 the most. Like I said, randomly I'd come in. They put me in the kitchen one day, put me in Seg, but 9 times out of 10 I was on G2. And he worked with me quite a bit, so we all knew the inmates, and me and him both were just kind of, if they weren't fighting or, what prisons are known for, we kind of would let everything else slide. If we smelt weed we kind of be like, dude, if I can smell it, the sergeant can smell it, you know, make sure I can't smell it, but never really, they lived there, so we wasn't really just trying to make their lives completely miserable, kind of, get along and get to the end of the day kind of thing. But these inmates, they liked us because of that, because we wouldn't let anything crazy slide, but we wasn't there just to give them a hard time, so we would cut up with them. So it'd be time for count, and you got to lock them down. And they were pretty good about it, but they would take their time locking down, and you got to have them locked down by a certain time so you could count them. But this guy I was working with, almost every day he'd go to lock them down, and they would be, slow going, and he would just start yelling, "Y'all ain't nothing but asphalt babies. It was your mama's ass and your daddy's fault." And I'm in the bubble just rolling laughing. This dude was a nut. One day he came in the bubble where I was at, because usually he was the floor officer, I was the bubble officer, and we would swap out from time to time. That was, after I was okay getting on the floor and I knew the inmates and all that. But he came in the bubble one day for count. They were locked down, so we're sitting in there waiting for count time, or waiting until time to get off, because we had to lock them down at the end of shift too, and then we'd wait for our relief. So he's sitting there and he picked this little bitty sore on his nose, like the tiniest little scab, and there was this little dot of blood on his nose, and he had a tissue, and he'd go, "Am I bleeding to death?" And he'd look at that little bitty spot of blood on the tissue and go, "Hell yeah, I'm bleeding to death." I don't know, he had me rolling. But, yeah, I won't say his name just in case, though, but dude was funny. We'd always have some laughs in that daggone bubble. But anyway, there's 3 more prison stories for you. That inmate, where's my doo-doo? He was a nut. But anyway, thanks for joining me. Remember to like, comment, and share. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.